Welcome. I'm Jaimee Cali, lead fiction instructor at the Social Writerly. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Sarah Van Clef, our CEO, founder, and fearless leader. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you? I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Jaimee, for taking the time on this Saturday morning to talk to me about our business.
Yes. So before we dive into a couple questions I have about the Social Writerly, I just wanted to kind of give everyone a little bit of an overview of your very accomplished self. So Sarah not only is our fearless leader here at the Social Writerly, but she has a dual master's in English with a concentration in creative writing and an MFA in creative writing nonfiction. When she's not doing everything Social Writerly, she is also a reviews editor at Philadelphia Stories. She's an adjunct professor at Brookdale Community College and Monmouth University, and she's a faculty writing assistant at Monmouth University's Writing Center. So lots of writing, lots of busyness. And we're so happy that you were here to chat with us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to sit down and actually talk to you about the social writerly and how we all started. I feel like we've never really done that. I mean, we've talked off camera. I remember the day that we decided that the social writerly was actually going to be a thing. And I feel like we've come so far since then, and I'm so excited to really tell all of our viewers um, how it all started.
Yes, and I'm maybe I'm just like really weird, but I love that you're a nonfiction creative writer and you're about to tell us our story of the Social Writerly. There's something like, I don't know, meta about that
Like,
maybe.
here we go.
Exactly. Like, I just anticipate you to like open the book of the Social Writerly and read from it.
Literally, the notebook that I
Yes,
have on my lap is the
all of,
beginnings of the social
all of our
writerly.
notes. Well, let's get started with kind of where did the Social Writerly come from? What was the inspiration for the idea for this business? Why create an creative writing business?
So the social writerly kind of came to fruition. I was working for a different company with a friend of mine, and it was called Second Renaissance Arts. It no longer is in business, but we were doing a lot of similar things. And um, my co-partner at the time wanted to take this idea of creating a community of writers and artists and theater people and musicians and bring them to a space where they could all be together. And I thought that was a really great idea. I jumped on board. I became an instructor and I did classes similar to what we do at the Writerly. And then, we live in very different places. And so we had a falling out in terms of the business. And I realized that while I was doing it, how much good was coming out of this. It wasn't just for me, and really honing my skills on being an instructor. And I
Mhm.
always wanted to be a teacher since I was like 5 years old. And so it was the first time where I was like, oh my God, I'm actually teaching creative writing. And I had to like do lesson plans and things like that. So when it was over, I was really sad. And I met Jaimee, you. And so I was like, I think that we need to stay together
Mhm.
when it comes to writing, having that accountability. I was writing really great stuff at the time because of the classes I was not only preparing for, but being a part of myself. And that's sort of how the social writerly became because I realized that there was a need for a creative community that, sometimes you can't meet up, you
Mhm.
have to just stay on Zoom. And thank God for Zoom. I think that Zoom was the best creation ever. I know it came out of, COVID, but it really, it wasn't for Zoom, we wouldn't be sitting here. So,
No, and I think I know that we talk about, and I know you talk about in your classes too, that writing is such a solitary act. So to be able to find community is always so wonderful, but also really unique because not everybody finds that writing community. And I think that Zoom makes that community a little bit, or any online platform. But it makes that community a little bit easier because you don't necessarily have to like go out to seek it, right? Like you just have to log in from your living room, your kitchen, wherever. um and yeah, I think it really helps bridge a lot of those gaps for artists.
Absolutely. And I think that really we as artists utilize Zoom during the pandemic
Mhm,
especially, and we didn't realize how much we needed artists especially. I don't know about everybody else, but for me, how much I needed that community. And we'll probably dive more into this during the interview, where sort of like my history of why I really love and appreciate community is how you make friends. Like I don't
mhm,
really know how to make friends if they're not in a community. I'm a very community oriented person. And when the pandemic hit, I was sort of like, I don't know how to like hang out with people
mhm,
anymore. And I don't know how to still keep that intellectual
mhm,
desire that I needed so bad. And thankfully, I was in the middle of my master's program. So I had really great teachers and things like that. But in the meanwhile, I was able to jump on Zoom and like watch poetry
mhm,
readings and read work still, and keep that connection with my community still. And once we started in 2022, uh, I really felt that it was important that we continued on this track of building community on a virtual platform,
mhm.
because it was something that fueled me during a hard time. And I feel like some people are still trying to get back to normalcy.
Mhm. No, I agree. I mean, I am so much more inclined to hop on a virtual meeting or like go to a book reading or something if it's online, especially during the week, after work. If I don't have to be there physically in person, if I can kind of come home, unwind, and just open my laptop and hang out versus having to like go to a place, sit there. It's still wonderful to connect in person, but then like the idea of like now I've got to commute all the way home and stuff. Um, Especially during the work week, it's not something I really love because I feel like it's almost like a barrier because I'm like, oh, well, that's like another, like 3 hours till I'm home from my day then.
Yeah.
So but if I could just hop on an online call or watch something virtually, and I can be so much more relaxed in my own home space, sort of comfy, cozy vibes. I definitely enjoy that so much more. Still love to meet in person and everything. It's
Me
just
too, absolutely.
yeah, I just think that from like a practicality standpoint, it's so much easier for me to do things during the week and like fit things into my schedule when I'm not worried about like, okay, like how long will this commute take and where's parking and all of those other logistical things. It almost makes it like a no-brainer at that point. Like there's no reason why I shouldn't participate if all I'm doing is hopping on a Zoom call.
Exactly, and I also feel like too that people who have social anxiety, and I feel like a lot of
Yes.
writers do. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have necessarily social anxiety, but I do have anxiety, especially going into New York City.
Yeah.
So, and that's where a lot of the readings are. I
Mm-hmm.
know New Jersey has an excellent poetry scene, and that is amazing. Now they're all in-person events, but sometimes it's snowing, or sometimes it's raining, or sometimes it's a 10-hour day, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, and it's something that you can look forward to at the end of the day, where you're like, all right, I can like eat my dinner and also, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
watch somebody read their poems and still be inspired. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, for
No,
sure.
I 100% agree. So I think we touched on this a little bit, but what does the social writerly mean to you? Like if you were to sum it up in a word or a phrase.
I think the social writerly means to me a safe space. Creative spaces for me have always felt safe. Before the call, we were talking about Brookdale Community College, where
Mhm,
we both met. And that for me was the first time I felt safe in any kind of creative community ever.
mhm,
I mean, I've been writing for a long, long time, like forever, it feels like. But um, going to Brookdale and being part of the creative writing club there was the first time I felt that I was valued in a creative community and that I saw my own growth. And
mhm,
so that's what I hope the social writerly means to other people, but that's how I feel like it means to me. Uh, to have a safe space where you can experiment on stuff and try a new genre or read something you've never read before. Or my cousin took a class once
mhm,
and she's a math person. We are polar opposites. and she she was like, "I'm not a reader. Can you find everything on Book on Tape?" And I was like, "Okay." So I did. I found all the readings that I did on audio, and she was like, "If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have
Hmm.
read half these things." And I think it's about feeling safe enough to try something new. And that's
Hmm.
what I feel like the social rarely means to me.
And I think inclusivity, like talking about, your cousin who's a math person, like this idea that I think that for people who aren't, they don't see themselves as maybe like capital W writers, like maybe they're not published or they haven't written in a long time or they've never written, but it's something that they've been sort of like interested in or curious about. Signing up for a writing class, especially in person, is probably one of the most horrifying
Daunting.
things, right? Like I don't like to
So
share my writing and I work for the social writing. Like that's a scary experience. It's a vulnerable moment, right? Because you're sharing a piece of yourself. So to be able to create a space that's it's like we're not looking for people who have tens of years in experience and all these credentials, like we're looking for people who just have an interest in coming to a space and sharing words and sharing thoughts. I think that that's
and
really special. And thinking, yes, absolutely.
thinking. And as
Um,
a professor, I also feel that I really take into account the idea of expanded thinking.
mhm,
And I think if anything, that's how you're going to grow as a writer is thinking wide,
mhm,
not long. Um, and reading stuff that you never would have read before, if not told you had to. And I think that kind of goes back to like being in school. I've been in
mhm,
school forever. I'm still in school. I will be a lifer. I guarantee that. I audit classes.
mhm,
I take classes online. I just want to learn all the time. I'm a big advocate for learning
mhm,
everything. And I think that that's a big thing when it comes to thinking. The more you read, the more you're exposed to a community where they are thinkers, deeper thinkers.
mhm.
The more you'll see yourself in other people. And that's what I hope to also do at the Writerly as well.
I love this idea of like deep thinking too, because I feel like everything is so fast paced in society now. Like news, social media, everything is sort of like 30 seconds or less, and then you're on to the next thing. But like thinking really requires you to sort of like be in a moment for a really long amount of time, right?
True.
Like you're not going to make those connections, you're not going to critically evaluate anything. If you're just kind of like, okay, I read it, this was the plot, on to the next thing. You really have to kind of, in your mind make those connections between like all of the different pieces of knowledge you have in your brain. um and I think that that's also a really interesting, I don't know if it's an exercise of the social writerly or an unintended mission of the social writerly, but is this idea of like slowing down.
Yes,
And like,
absolutely.
like our classes are usually about 2 hours, and that doesn't necessarily feel like a really long amount of time, but I mean, if you're on social media in 2 hours, I am not a math person, so I don't know how many 30-second videos you've watched in 2 hours, but so much more content is being thrown at you in that time frame, as opposed to coming and sitting in class and talking about the reading and talking about the writing and really focusing on only a few pieces of information. But again, to your point, like that wide expansion, you may only have two or three topics that you're talking about, the reading, a couple pieces of writing, but you're in the wide scope of things discussing so many different aspects of
Yeah.
life and society.
And it's a
And
self-discovery thing too.
yes,
And
yes.
that's what I have um that's what I really hope for in all of my classes, whether it's at the social rarely, teaching freshman
Mhm,
composition, is I want them to have some kind of discovery of the self, whether it's figuring out what you don't like
mhm,
or figuring out what lights you up. And the social writerly lights me up. Although It is a daunting venture. I'm having such a great time
Mhm,
as somebody who is starting a business in a time of social turmoil. And I want to talk about this too a little bit. This idea that, and you brought it up a little bit, the idea of slowing down
mhm,
and being kind to one another and appreciating the words of others. I feel like
mhm,
that sort of has gotten lost in our society right now. And my hopes for the social writerly is to build a community that's not going to exclude anyone,
mhm,
whether it's your race or your gender or your sexuality or your trauma or anything. I don't
mhm,
want anyone to feel that they can't express themselves in a
mhm,
way, in whatever way they want, whether they're writing lists or brainstorming about a story or just like taking a walk and then writing about it.
mhm,
And I think that's what the beauty of the social writerly is that there's no one way to teach a class, and it's not really about being in school. Um,
yes.
that was a big thing when we started the writerly as well, is that we didn't want it to feel like a school
Mhm,
at all. We wanted it to feel like we're going to come in and we're going to support you,
mhm,
and we're going to lift you up in a time where you may feel insecure about trying something new,
mhm.
or insecure or self-conscious about the words you put on paper, that we want to be here to celebrate that, because there's little nuggets of gold in them, and we're going to give you the autonomy to do so.
No, I think that's also one of the really beautiful things is I know just from teaching my summer class, I sort of had type A hyper prepared. So I had like my week to week kind of mapped out. And I was like, it's not a college class, so there's lots of flexibility. I told them the first week, these are the prompts to write about, but you could totally reject these prompts and just give me whatever words you want when we meet again in 2 weeks. And what ended up happening was we basically ended up turning that class into a workshop for two very specific stories for my students in that class, because that's just what spoke to them, what spoke to us, and it ended up being really fabulous, but it looked nothing like the class I had originally prepared for. And I don't know that you could do the same thing. There's some flexibility in, college classes and things like that, but for the most part, you've got to hit those goals that the college sets. So how you do that is a little bit up to you, but you've got to make sure that like that end point, you've reached it. These classes are not, they're not like that. We don't have a word count requirement or um any kind of goal other than helping the students to progress as writers, as thinkers, and as human beings.
Exactly.
And to have fun. Fun is a big thing.
Yeah.
Lots of fun. But I know you also had similar experience with your one student in terms of like self discovery during his class with you, both in his
Yeah.
writing and personally. And I think that that's an amazing thing to be able to accomplish in just really what for the entire year will be a few short weeks.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, Jamie. And I know
Mhm.
you had a question about that. Like, what was the highlight of my
Yes.
writerly
Yes, we
time?
can we can jump into, like looking back, we're at the end of 2023, almost a full year of social writerly classes and planning and all of that. So, what would you say is doesn't have to be like one highlight, but like what are some of the highlights from the year for you?
Well, the one that you just mentioned about my
Mhm,
student, John Harder, which we actually have an interview with him because he's doing a lot of really cool stuff in the writing world. So
mhm,
if you haven't already, go check that out for sure. Um, but John Harder came to my class, and I've known him like personally, and I was like, "Come on, just take this class with me. It's going to be fun." And he ended up really discovering so much about his life and while in these prompts. And my class was place and space in multi-genre writing. So um I broke up the class in three sections. So we started with nonfiction, and then we moved, and that was 2 weeks. And then we did 2 weeks of fiction, and then we did 2 weeks of poetry at the end. We don't do a lot of poetry at the Social Rarely. We're hoping to do more in the future. But I wanted to give a little taste of poetry to my students because I was a poetry concentration in my bachelor's degree. So I have some expertise on this. And I've never taught a poetry class before, so I was like, let's try this out. So when we started with the nonfiction, I told my students, I said, and I only had two, but it doesn't matter. I feel like the smaller the class, the more intimate you get
Mhm.
with them in terms of let's really deep dive and think and talk about thinking,
Mhm.
and talk about how we see the world. So, smaller classes, it doesn't really matter how many people are in the class, you're going to get something out of them. So we were in the nonfiction part of the class, and I told the students I said, listen, I want everybody to go take a walk in somewhere that they haven't been in a while or they haven't been before. Um, and I said, I want you, while you're walking, I want you to go take some pictures. Just be in that experience. And also,
Mhm.
like, I needed to go do that too because I need to go take walks sometimes. So, and I feel like that always grounds me in a way where, like, sometimes I'm just so overwhelmed and I'm like, you know what? I gotta go take a walk in
Mhm.
silence, and that's just what helps me. So, and people must be like, "Why are you just walking without any, like, headphones
Mhm.
or just out?" Because, you go to the park and people are always on their phones talking.
Mhm.
I just go and, like, wanna actually be present, and hear my feet actually move. So, I said, "I thought that would be really a good idea to put this into a writing prompt." So I told them to go take a walk, take some pictures of the place that they're in. And then while they're walking, sit down on a bench or sit down somewhere and write some things down that they observe, whether it's, if everybody's, talking on their phones, or if they're at like a certain place. Like I said, you don't have to be outside. You can go to like the mall, sit down and actually be present in your
Mhm.
moment that you're sitting and then write some things down. And then I wanted them, after they're done with their walk, to come home, and I know this is like a tall order, but I was like, I want you to like have this as an experience.
Mhm.
So I was like, I want you to go home and I want you to look through these pictures and I want you to look at what's in the foreground and I want you to look what's in the background. And think about the things that you necessarily didn't notice while you were there, but you captured in those pictures.
Oh, very cool.
And then I wanted them to write a reflective essay
Mhm.
about the experience. So John, he went back to his childhood town. And I live actually pretty close to his childhood town,
Mhm.
so I had an idea of what it looked like. But he hadn't come back in a very long time. And as he's walking, doing this exercise, he's thinking about the first time he's ever walked there, when he was like 7 years old, coming from New York City to South River, New Jersey, and how
Mhm.
how that transitioned. It's very much like an assimilation, going from city life to suburbia
Mhm.
life, and how now 20 some odd years later, it looks like the shell of its former self, and how, you know, it didn't grow up with him. He's now a grown man, um,
Oh.
and how it didn't grow. It sort of just stayed stagnant and wasn't what it was, and how things always change without you even noticing them.
Mhm.
Everything doesn't last forever. And that was really the moral of this. And that was really the theme of all of his writing, since then, that moment. And he said to me after that that he writes every day since that moment. And I was so taken aback by that because I was not expecting someone to have such a groundbreaking
Mhm.
experience with this prompt. I just thought, sometimes you have to be forced to stay present. And
Mhm.
I sometimes have to force myself to stay present because I am running around like a crazy person, being wearing a lot of different hats every day.
Mhm.
So this exercise was really for me too. And a lot of my exercises that I give my students are things that I also should be doing for myself. And they work for me because
Mhm.
and I'll be like, that worked. Or sometimes I'll be like, that didn't work so much.
Mhm.
But that one specifically, he came back to me and he goes, I wouldn't have noticed the things that I notice without that prompt. And that was a big, big highlight um, at the writerly so far. But yeah, I was so proud of him. And then he continued to write some really beautiful pieces about
Mhm.
um, time and the lapse of time throughout his life. And he ended up writing this really beautiful poem at the end of it, that really like rocked us at the end of the gathering that we had as a whole class. So
I'm
really,
trying to think. It was a sonnet, right? He wrote a
it's a
sonnet, which I
sonnet.
loved because I feel like they're almost like a dying piece of poetry. Like not so many people write them anymore. So I like that he took something really old but made it new.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he was so, because I made a PowerPoint and I put all the different poetry
Hmm.
like terms, terminology, different kinds of poems. Um and my favorite poem that we did was the, oh my god, I can't, it's escaping me right now, but it has a refrain in it and you have
Hmm.
to keep repeating the lines, and they all are interconnected. Um and I had them do that in the class, and he goes,
Hmm.
"Well, can you talk to me about the sonnet?" And I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, wasn't prepared for that. Uh, so I was like, "Yeah, we'll definitely talk about the sonnet." And so the fact that people are interested in poetry is a big
Hmm.
deal, because as you know, a lot of people are very intimidated, and as they say, poetry is a very intimidating genre
Hmm.
of writing, and people are like, "Ooh, poetry, like I don't get it." But if you really, again, going back to slowing down,
Hmm.
um, and reading a poem and really being a part of it, that's something that's different than any other genre.
Hmm.
You go into someone's body when you read a poem, and you are so close to their soul that
Hmm.
there's no other way to get that close, unless you know them personally. And poetry for me, I fell in love with poetry in high school, and I was just like, I never want to read anything else. All I did was read poetry for 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, and because it was just like, I don't know, I don't think that there's anything else that's speaking to me as
Hmm.
clearly as poetry, because that's the most vulnerable genre. And I feel like people are afraid of that. But the fact that John did that at the end, kind of made a testimonial to me that he felt safe enough to try something new, but
Hmm.
also let us see his soul. And that's something I hope for every student to do in the end.
Yes, that's really like a great example of um, bravery and fearlessness in writing and how taking these classes, not saying that everyone is going to fall in love with poetry if you take these classes, but there's this real opportunity to connect with your deeper self. And in doing so, you do become a little bit braver because you know yourself a little bit better. You're a little more comfortable than where you started. I think that's one of the really unique things about practicing really any form of art, whether it's writing or music or painting or sculpture or sketching. It's this idea that you're really putting something that's so deep to yourself, so personal out there for the world to see. And as you said, this was somebody who would not have probably defined himself as a writer before these classes.
I don't think so.
And
I mean, he wrote other things, but nothing like this.
yeah, and I think that there is something to be said about the fact that he's writing every day. I don't even write every day, which is probably so terrible to admit as a writer. But it's a hard practice, and it's something that I hope to get to. But to be able to really say like this is something I'm dedicating myself to, and to make that promise to yourself and then stick to it is a really beautiful sort of end to our look back. Of course, you can share any other highlights from the year that you want to share, but I really think that is such a tremendous high point.
And the fact that he, at the end of this, he said to me, he goes, "Because of the writerly, I'm going to go back to school and finish my bachelor's degree." Like, I still get chills about that. Because that really was in the back of my head when we decided to really build this, is
Mm-hmm.
there are going to be people that are coming to our classes that are intimidated by the MFA, or are
Mm-hmm.
intimidated by getting their master's, or even intimidated by going to get their bachelor's degree. And if we could be the prerequisite to that, and that they can go to their English classes and
Mm-hmm.
feel confident because they wrote a few essays that
Mm-hmm.
are connected to them, and they have an understanding of them as a writer, and they understand the hat that they have to put on when they become a writer.
Mm-hmm.
um, that gives me the most joy, and really validates what I do is what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. And I felt like that for me was like, I like, when he said that, I was like crying because I was like, oh my God.
It's so
I'm
true.
just so proud to be a part of this.
No, and I think that good teachers or good professors, the best thing that we can do is inspire our students. Am I very happy when students, they deepen their writing skills or they really start to critically think at the end of the semester? Absolutely. I mean, those are all really great high points, but I really love when at the end of my semesters with students or the end of my classes with the social writerly, when somebody kind of comes and says, I'm doing something different with my life because we had this conversation in class and we talked about all of these things, and it made me realize that the thing I'm doing right now doesn't resonate with me. It doesn't light me up. It doesn't bring me joy. But this other thing is something I love, and I want to spend time and I want to give attention to that. And I think that at the end of the day, like for me at least, that's the whole reason for doing all of this adjuncting, teaching at the social rate. Like I want to inspire people to find the most authentic versions of themselves.
And it's funny that you say that because, and I want to give a shout out to somebody in this interview
Mm-hmm.
is Liz Carlin, um, who is a Reiki instructor and a self-love coach. And if it wasn't for her, I would not be sitting here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she said to me once that writing is healing, and that writing and being a writing instructor is being a healer. And I did not think I was going to talk about this today either, and I kind of want to get emotional about it, but um, that's not my intention, is to heal,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that we do subconsciously as instructors, is that we challenge our students to open the boxes that maybe been sitting on the shelves for a
Mm-hmm.
while. And it's not out of fear, it's not out of force.
Mm-hmm.
You choose to be there. And that's the really great part about being at the social writerly, is that you have a choice. If you're not ready, you put the box back on the shelf and you write about something else.
Mm-hmm.
Or you decide that you want to talk about the box that's on the shelf emotionally, and maybe put it into like a fictional character and talk it through that way. But we're all here and we're all ready for it. We're
Mm-hmm.
all, about it, and we're here to support whatever happens in these journey. And I feel like that's a big part of our classes as well, is that these are journey classes. You start and you're at the beginning of the journey. And I do
Mm-hmm.
this in all my classes, whether it's adjuncting, whether I just taught a professional writing class this semester at Monmouth University. But I make everybody do the same thing. I said, I want you to write a letter to yourself. And I want you to tell yourself what challenges that you're anticipating on facing. What are some fears that you have? What are some hopes and
Mm-hmm.
dreams that you have while being in this class? And the first time I ever taught, I had my students, I think you did this, write a letter to the first time you ever felt creative, whether
Mm-hmm.
you were 8, whether you were 16, and invite that inner artist back into the space that you're in. And I do this to all my students, and they're like, oh my God, I haven't said hello to that person in a very long time,
Mm-hmm.
or I never, I never let that artist out, because I have other things I have to do. And the Writerly is a place where your inner artist can shine. And I hope that more students aren't afraid of that, because it's a beautiful thing when the inner artist is allowed to be present. You'll see magical things happen in your life.
I love this. I have one more question, but I almost just want to end on that note because it's such a beautiful note. I mean, I'm a huge Liz is literally also the reason I am here. I do not know what I would have done without Liz. Personally, with my inner artist as well, so much came from my interactions and my work with Liz. Um, but I do want to talk about looking forward.
Okay.
We could circle back to the inner artist at the end. I love the inner artist because I think when I first started working with Liz, my inner artist was still very small. Like she was, I don't know, maybe 5-year-old me or 10-year-old me, something like that. And now when I picture my inner artist, she's just like this like very vibrant adult me. Like it's a different version of me in my head that I picture when I picture my inner artist, but she's me as an adult now. And that growth happened because of Liz, because of you. I'll give a little bit of props to myself, but definitely lots of outside influence. And so like I can personally attest to the growth that writing, especially in a collective format like this, does for your artist. But I do want to ask, what are you looking forward to for the Social Writerly in 2024?
There's so much I want to look forward to in 2024. We have a lot coming up. Um, we have the Home for the Holidays campaign that we're working with
Mm-hmm.
Habitat for Humanity in Monmouth County. That's been so much fun. Really diving into talking about home. Again, I'm a big advocate for place and space, so
Mm-hmm.
that's like my bread and butter. We're also hoping in 2024 to be working with local libraries, which is then spreading community off the virtual platform. Don't worry, we're staying on the virtual platform also, but we really want to get the name out and really spread our mission of building community and building support
Mm-hmm.
to our local neighbors and artists that are around us. We're also hoping to get into some 55 and older communities because I feel like that age bracket has a gold mine of stories that I want to hear. So if uh, your community is interested in having the Social Writerly come, please contact us at our email.
Mm-hmm.
We are so excited to bring our services to you. But yeah, we have so much coming up in the Writerly. And please, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our newsletter. That's where we're going to really be um, telling you the updates of what's
Mm-hmm.
happening month by month. And this interview will probably be on there as well.
Yes.
So uh, definitely check us out. But yeah, Jaimee, I before we close this interview, I just want to thank you too, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be sitting here. It takes a village to start
Mm-hmm.
a business, and it takes a good team to really let this business shine.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't have asked for a better partner to do this with.
Oh, thank you. No, I mean, I feel the same way. I feel very fortunate. Not only because I mean we've known each other since we went to Brookdale, but there was like we'll call it our gap years. We just went off and did different things. And so being able to reconnect with you has been amazing. And I love everything about the Social Writerly. I think if I wasn't a part of the Social Writerly, I would take classes with us because that is it's everything I wanted in a creative writing class in terms of, like not having the college credit tied to it. So like just
Yeah.
a place to express myself, and to be able to build a business around that is truly amazing. And to do it as two women is super exciting. I'm all about female empowerment in general, but definitely getting more women in this kind of entrepreneurial space, I think is so wonderful. So I'm so excited that we carry this forward into 2024 together. And I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to everything that the year brings for the business and for us.
me too. It's going to be fabulous. And I can't wait to see how it blossoms. And then next year, we'll have to have another interview to see what happened.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of this is what we talked about in 2023. Let's see where we grew in 2024. Thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone on here is looking to unleash their inner artist, I highly recommend you follow us at the Social Writerly. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and now TikTok. We are also
Woo!
very exciting for two millennials. We're also on YouTube where you can find this video along with our previous interviews. If you go to our website, thesocialwriterly.com, you can stay up to date on all of our upcoming class offerings. And you can also sign up to be part of our newsletter. It goes out middle of the month around the 15th every month, and it's got class information. Anytime we do interviews like this, those are usually posted on there. Usually a couple other little good bits and bobs also. So we
Absolutely.
absolutely invite you to join our newsletter community as well. And we hope to see you in a class in the future.
Well, thank you again so much, everybody, for listening too. And if you also would want to follow me, I do post some things as well. My name on Instagram is VIVECCA, or you can also just follow the Social Writerly as well. I usually am tagged in those things too. So we're both all cross posted as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you at our next interview.
Hi, Jaimee. Thanks.